At 2:17 a.m. on March 19, 1943, Lieutenant Richard O'Kane stood on the conning tower of the USS Wahoo in the Yellow Sea, watching a Japanese convoy through his binoculars, about to make a decision that would get him court-martialed or make him a legend. The surface was calm, almost no moon, perfect conditions for what submariners called suicide. The convoy was 3 miles ahead, 7 fat transport ships, destroyers flanking them. O'Kane could smell diesel exhaust mixing with salt air. His captain, Commander Dudley Morton, stood beside him. Neither man spoke. They both knew what traditional doctrine said. Dive. Attack submerged. Stay safe. But they also knew that doctrine was getting American submariners killed while Japanese convoys sailed safely to their destinations. Morton finally broke the silence. "We're going in on the surface." O'Kane felt his stomach drop. Surface attacks at night violated every rule in the book. But he'd watched too many convoys escape, too many brothers die following rules that didn't work. Richard Hetherington O'Kane was 32 years old, an academy graduate from New Hampshire, not some farm kid or factory worker. He'd trained his entire adult life for submarine warfare, 5 years in the peacetime Navy, 18 months of war. He was executive officer of the Wahoo, second in command, the thinking officer, the calculating one, and he was furious. The U.S. submarine fleet was failing, completely failing. Everyone knew it. Nobody would say it out loud. American doctrine said submarines attacked submerged during daylight. You spotted a convoy. You dove to periscope depth. You crept into position at 2 knots. You fired torpedoes from 3,000 yards. Then you went deep and prayed the destroyers didn't find you. The problem was simple. It didn't work. Japanese convoys zigzagged constantly. Closing to firing position took hours. By the time you got there, they'd changed course. Your torpedoes missed. Or worse, they hit and didn't explode because the Mark 14 torpedo was defective. Everyone knew that too. Bureau of Ordnance said the torpedoes were fine. Submarine commanders knew better. They'd watched perfect shots bounce off enemy hulls. O'Kane had been on 5 war patrols. The Wahoo's 6th was underway. In those 5 patrols, they'd sunk exactly 4 confirmed ships. 4 ships in 5 months. Meanwhile, Japanese supplies poured into their island garrisons. American submarines were supposed to strangle Japan's supply lines. Instead, they were barely scratching the paint. The doctrine made sense on paper. Submerged attacks kept you safe from destroyers. But safe wasn't winning the war. O'Kane had done the math. At current rates, American submarines would need 40 years to significantly impact Japanese logistics. They didn't have 40 years. They probably didn't have 4 years. Worse, the cautious doctrine was still getting men killed. Just differently, slowly. Through failed attacks and depth charge hunts, O'Kane had watched it happen. He'd listened to it happen over the radio. Submarines going out on patrol and never coming back. No dramatic battles, no heroic last stands. Just silence, missing and presumed lost. The ocean keeping its secrets. Commander Morton had taken command of Wahoo 2 months earlier. He was different from other skippers, aggressive, willing to question doctrine, willing to listen to his executive officer's ideas. O'Kane had been talking about surface attacks for weeks. Morton had been thinking about it too. The Japanese didn't expect surface attacks. Their destroyers hunted for submerged submarines. Their lookouts watched for periscopes. A submarine on the surface at night, running on diesel engines at 20 knots, could get inside a convoy before anyone realized what was happening. It was tactically brilliant. It was also completely unauthorized, and it would probably get them all killed. Lieutenant Commander John Cromwell never got to test new tactics. He went down with the USS Sculpin on November 19, 1943. Age 43. Annapolis graduate. Father of 3 daughters back in California. The Sculpin had been conducting a standard submerged daylight attack on a convoy near Truk. Everything by the book. Everything according to doctrine. The attack failed. Torpedoes missed or malfunctioned. The destroyers counterattacked. Depth charges damaged the Sculpin's hull. She couldn't dive. Forced to surface in daylight with destroyers closing. Cromwell knew he carried classified information about upcoming operations. He knew Japanese interrogators would torture it out of him. He stayed aboard when his crew abandoned ship, went down with his boat rather than risk compromise. O'Kane had met Cromwell once. Good officer, smart tactician, dead because doctrine put him in an impossible situation. Lieutenant Commander Howard Gilmore made his name at surface attacks, but he died at 1 January 7, 1943. Just 2 months before O'Kane stood on Wahoo's conning tower. Gilmore commanded the USS Growler. He'd been running surface attacks against Japanese shipping. Aggressive as hell. Then a Japanese gunboat surprised him at night, rammed the Growler before anyone could dive. Gilmore was on the bridge. Got shot up badly in the collision. Couldn't make it down the hatch before the gunboat's crew opened fire. His last words went down in Navy legend. "Take her down." He ordered his crew to dive while he was still topside. Drowned so his boat could survive. Age 37, from Michigan. Left a wife and daughter. Congressional Medal of Honor, posthumous. But he was still dead. Those were the famous ones. The ones who got medals and newspaper stories. O'Kane knew about the others. The boats that just vanished. USS Grunion disappeared in July 1942 near the Aleutians. Lieutenant Commander Manert Abele commanding. 70 men aboard. Probably lost to Japanese depth charges during a submerged attack. Nobody knew for sure. They just never came back. USS Amberjack, lost in February 1943. Lieutenant Commander John Bowl commanding. Last heard from near the Solomon Islands. Conducting submerged patrols. Standard doctrine. 74 men. Gone, USS Grampus. Lost in March 1943. Commander John Craig commanding. 71 men, somewhere near the Philippines. Following doctrine. Attacking submerged. Never came home. The list went on, and on. By March 1943, the U.S. had lost 15 submarines in the Pacific. That was 15 boats and over 1,000 submariners. Dead, because they were following rules written before the war by officers who'd never faced Japanese destroyers. O'Kane thought about them every time Morton talked about surface attacks. All those men who'd done everything right according to doctrine. All those men who were dead anyway. Maybe it was time to do something wrong. The math was brutal. A submerged submarine moved at 2 knots. Sometimes 3 if you wanted to drain the batteries fast. A Japanese convoy moved at 10 knots. The destroyers could sprint at 35 knots if they detected you. You spotted a convoy, maybe 15 miles away. You had to predict where they'd be in 4 hours while you crept into position. But Japanese convoys zigzagged every 7 to 12 minutes. Random course changes to avoid submarine attacks. By the time you reached your calculated intercept point, they'd zagged somewhere else. If you got lucky, if your calculations were perfect, you reached firing position. 3,000 yards from the target. You raised your periscope for 8 seconds. Any longer, and the destroyers spotted your wake. 8 seconds to identify the target, estimate range, estimate speed, estimate angle on the bow. Then down periscope. Calculate the firing solution. Hope your data was accurate, then you fired. 4 torpedoes typically, maybe 6 if you were desperate. The Mark 14 torpedoes were supposed to run at 46 knots. They were supposed to explode on contact or magnetically beneath the target's keel. They were supposed to be war-winning weapons. They were pieces of shit. That's what every submarine skipper called them privately. The contact exploders failed 60% of the time. The magnetic exploders triggered randomly or not at all. The depth-keeping mechanism was unreliable. Torpedoes ran too deep, passing under targets, or too shallow, bouncing off hulls without exploding. Submarine commanders filed report after report. Heard 3 distinct hits, no explosions. Observed torpedo strike target amidships, no detonation. Entire salvo passed beneath convoy without effect. The Bureau of Ordnance ignored them all, blamed the submarine commanders, said they were missing, said they were making excuses, said the Mark 14 was fine. It wasn't fine. It was killing American submariners. Not directly, but every failed attack meant more time in enemy waters. More time for destroyers to hunt you. More time for Japanese airplanes to spot you. More chances to die. And if your torpedoes somehow worked, if they actually hit and exploded, you still had to escape. The destroyers heard the explosions. They triangulated your position. They came at 35 knots with depth charges. You went deep. 300 feet, 400 feet, as deep as your hull could take. You rigged for silent running, turned off everything electrical, waited in the dark while explosions walked toward you. Depth charges didn't have to hit you directly. They exploded with 600 pounds of TNT. The pressure wave from 50 feet away could rupture your hull, crack your welds, shatter your instruments. Even near misses caused damage. Leaks started, electrical systems failed, steering problems developed. Some boats survived the immediate attack but couldn't surface safely. They had to stay down with damaged systems, batteries dying, air going bad, CO2 levels rising, men getting sleepy, then unconscious, then dead. All because you'd followed doctrine perfectly. The submariners knew the solution. Get closer, fire from 1,000 yards or less. Point-blank range where even defective torpedoes couldn't miss. But you couldn't get that close submerged. The math didn't work. The convoy outran you, so submarine commanders requested permission to try surface attacks. Night attacks at close range using speed and surprise. High command said no. Too dangerous. Too reckless. Submarines weren't surface raiders. They were underwater predators. Stay submerged. Stay safe. Follow doctrine. Never mind that safe doctrine had killed 1,000 men in 18 months. Never mind that Japanese shipping barely noticed American submarines. Never mind that the whole point of submarines was to sink enemy ships, not survive patrols. Doctrine was doctrine. Orders were orders. You followed them or faced court-martial. February 14, 1943. Valentine's Day. The USS Wahoo was hunting near Palau. O'Kane stood next to Morton as they tracked a Japanese convoy through the periscope. 4 transports. 2 destroyers. Exactly the target they needed. Morton did everything right. Calculated the intercept perfectly. Spent 6 hours creeping into position. Got to 2,800 yards. Perfect setup. He fired 4 torpedoes. Perfect spread. The convoy never saw them coming. All 4 torpedoes missed. Not because Morton miscalculated. The targeting was perfect. The torpedoes just ran deeper than set. Passed right under the transports. No explosions. No hits. Nothing. The convoy sailed on. The destroyers didn't even realize they'd been attacked. Morton slammed his fist against the periscope. O'Kane heard him cursing. Every man in the conning tower heard it. They'd done everything perfectly. And perfectly didn't matter because their weapons didn't work. Then it got worse. One destroyer changed course. Started pinging. Active sonar. They'd detected something. Maybe Wahoo's wake. Maybe the torpedo tracks. The destroyer came straight at them. Morton took her deep. 350 feet. Ordered silent running. The first depth charge hit at 14:23 hours. Not close. Maybe 200 feet away. The concussion rattled the boat. Light bulbs shattered. Cork insulation rained from the overhead. Men grabbed handholds. Another explosion. Closer this time. The hull groaned. 50 feet away, maybe. Then another. And another. 28 depth charges in 45 minutes. They survived. The destroyer eventually gave up. Wahoo surfaced after dark to recharge batteries and repair damage. But the damage that mattered wasn't physical. It was psychological. Moral. The crew knew they'd done everything perfectly. They knew it didn't matter. Lieutenant George Grider was aboard that patrol. He watched Morton afterward. Watched the captain's face. Morton looked haunted. Not scared. Haunted. Like he was seeing ghosts. The ghosts of all those submariners who'd followed doctrine perfectly and died anyway. 2 days later, Morton found another convoy. Smaller this time. 2 transports, 1 destroyer. He made another perfect approach. 6 hours of patient stalking. Got to 200 yards. Fired 6 torpedoes. Put everything they had into this attack. 3 torpedoes missed. 2 hit without exploding. Contact exploders failed. The 6th torpedo ran wild, porpoising on the surface like a dolphin. The destroyer saw it. Saw the track leading back to Wahoo's position. Here they came again. More depth charges. Another beating. More damage. No sinkings. Nothing to show for it except growing desperation. Morton called O'Kane to his cabin that night, showed him the patrol report draft. 2 perfect attacks, 0 sinkings, 0 hits, 14 torpedoes expended. Nothing accomplished. High command would read this report and see failure. They'd see a captain who couldn't sink ships, maybe relieve him, maybe give Wahoo to someone else. O'Kane knew what Morton was thinking. He was thinking the same thing. You could follow doctrine perfectly and fail completely. The system was broken. The torpedoes were broken. The tactics were broken. Something had to change. What if we went in on the surface? O'Kane said it quietly. Not a formal suggestion, just thinking out loud. At night, full speed. Get inside 1,000 yards before they know we're there. Even if the torpedoes malfunction, we'd be close enough to see the hits. Close enough to reload and fire again if necessary. Morton didn't respond immediately. He stared at the patrol report, at those columns of zeros. 0 sinkings, 0 tonnage, 0 contribution to the war effort. Finally, he looked up. They'd court-martial us, he said it flatly. Statement of fact. Only if we survive, O'Kane replied. Dark humor. Submariner humor. Laugh because the alternative was screaming. Morton almost smiled. What if it works? He let the question hang. What if surface attacks actually sank ships? What if they could prove the doctrine wrong? What if they could show high command a better way? O'Kane knew the answer. If it worked, they'd be heroes. If it failed, they'd be dead. Either outcome was better than following doctrine perfectly and accomplishing nothing. Let's find out, he said. March 18, 1943. 1847 hours. The Wahoo was patrolling the Yellow Sea between China and Korea, Japanese-controlled waters. Dangerous as hell. Rich hunting grounds if you could survive long enough to find targets. Morton had been pushing north for 3 days, deeper into enemy territory, looking for convoys. O'Kane spotted them at 1923 hours, twilight, the sun just below the horizon, 7 smudges of smoke against the darkening sky. Big convoy. More ships than Wahoo had torpedoes, but torpedoes didn't matter if you couldn't sink anything. Morton came to the bridge, studied the convoy through binoculars. O'Kane counted the escorts. 4 destroyers, maybe 5. This wasn't some lightly defended merchant run. This was important cargo. Troops, maybe. Ammunition. Supplies for Japanese garrisons. Exactly the kind of convoy America needed destroyed. Standard doctrine said, wait for dawn. Let the convoy pass. Trail them until daylight. Make a submerged attack. Follow the rules. O'Kane knew how that would end. 6 hours of stalking. A perfect setup. Torpedoes missing or malfunctioning. Another failure. Another patrol report with zeros. Morton lowered his binoculars, looked at O'Kane. What do you think? He didn't specify what he was asking. He didn't need to. They'd been talking about this for weeks, planning it, debating it. Now the moment was here. O'Kane checked the sea state. Calm. Almost no wind. Checked the moon. 4 days from new. Almost no illumination. Checked the visibility. Maybe 3 miles in the twilight. Conditions were perfect. As perfect as they'd ever get. We could be inside the convoy before they realize we're not one of theirs, he said carefully. Morton nodded slowly. If we're wrong, if they spot us, we're 300 miles inside Japanese waters. No help, no backup. Just us and 4 destroyers. His voice was steady. Not scared. Just calculating the odds. A submarine on the surface couldn't outrun destroyers. Couldn't dive fast enough if spotted early. This was all or nothing. Success or death. O'Kane thought about those patrol reports. All those zeros. All those failed attacks. All those submariners following doctrine perfectly and dying anyway. He thought about Cromwell drowning rather than be captured. About Gilmore ordering his boat to dive without him. About all those crews that just vanished. "We're doing nothing now," he said quietly. "Might as well go down swinging." Morton smiled then. A real smile. Not the gallows humor submariners used to cope. A smile of recognition. He'd found someone as crazy as he was. Someone willing to bet everything on an unauthorized tactic. Someone who understood that following broken doctrine was its own kind of suicide. Just slower. "Battle stations," Morton said. "Surface attack. We go in at 2200. The next 3 hours were the longest of O'Kane's life. Morton kept Wahoo submerged, trailing the convoy at periscope depth, closing gradually, getting into position. The crew knew something unusual was happening. You didn't trail a convoy this close unless you were planning something aggressive. At 21:45 hours, Morton briefed the crew over the intercom, told them exactly what they were about to do. Surface attack, full speed run into the convoy, close-range torpedo shots. Every man at battle stations, no second chances. Some of the crew had been submariners for years. They knew this violated every doctrine. They also knew doctrine wasn't working. O'Kane listened to their reactions. No panic, no objections. Just grim acceptance. They trusted their captain. They trusted their executive officer. And they wanted to sink some ships. The torpedo room prepared all 10 bow tubes. Standard loadout was 6 bow tubes ready. But this attack would be different. They'd reload and fire as fast as possible. Multiple targets. Close range. The torpedo men double-checked the depth settings. Set to run at 10 feet. Shallow enough to hit any transport. The contact exploders were garbage, but at point-blank range, even defective torpedoes would sink ships. Probably. The engine room tested both diesels. Surface running meant diesel power. Maximum speed. The Wahoo could make 20 knots on the surface. Fast enough to close with the convoy. Maybe fast enough to escape afterward. Chief Machinist's mate Ritchie was a miracle worker with the engines. He promised they'd run perfectly. O'Kane believed him. At 21:55 hours, Morton took one last periscope observation. The convoy was 3 miles ahead, still steaming northward. No evasive maneuvers. They felt safe this deep in their own waters. No American submarines attacked at night. Everyone knew that. Morton smiled grimly. Everyone was about to be wrong. O'Kane climbed to the conning tower, made sure the lookouts were ready. Surface attacks meant visual targeting. No periscope solutions. Just eyes and binoculars and calculated guesses. At night, at high speed, while destroyers hunted you. O'Kane felt his heart hammering. Not fear exactly. Adrenaline. The knowledge that the next hour would make history or make widows. 200 hours. Morton gave the order. "Surface, all ahead flank. Execute surface attack." Wahoo blew ballast. Rose from the depths. Her diesel engines roared to life. 20 knots, straight toward the convoy. Point of no return. They couldn't dive quickly at this speed. If the Japanese spotted them early, they'd die on the surface under destroyer guns. But if the plan worked, if they got close enough, they'd sink more ships in one night than most submarines sank in entire patrols. O'Kane raised his binoculars. The convoy was 2 miles ahead now. Closing fast. "Here we go," he thought. "Time to find out if we're brilliant or suicidal." 277 hours. 1 mile to the convoy. Wahoo's bow cutting through calm water at 20 knots. The sound of diesels and rushing water. O'Kane could see individual ships now, not just smoke. Actual hulls and superstructures. 7 transports. The nearest one was maybe 8,000 yards. Dead ahead. The destroyers were flanking the convoy, 2 on each side. Their positions meant for submerged threats. They were pinging. Active sonar. Listening for submarines underwater. Not looking for submarines on the surface running at full speed. Not expecting what Wahoo was doing. 23 hours, 5,000 yards. O'Kane could see details now. The lead transport was huge, maybe 6,000 tons, probably carrying troops or equipment to Korea. Running lights off. Just a dark shape against darker water. No one on that transport suspected anything. Why would they? They were 300 miles inside Japanese-controlled waters, escorted by destroyers. Safe. Morton was calculating. Speed, distance, angle. Old-fashioned surface gunnery math. Nothing fancy. Nothing complicated. Just put the submarine where the torpedoes couldn't miss. "Steady on course," he called down. "All ahead, full. Prepare tubes 1 through 4. 1,000 yards. O'Kane could hear his own breathing. Fast, shallow. His hands gripped the bridge railing. Any second now, someone on that transport would look their way. Would see Wahoo's silhouette. Would sound an alarm. The destroyers would come screaming. This whole plan would collapse. 1,000 yards. Still no alarm. The Japanese still hadn't spotted them. O'Kane couldn't believe it. Wahoo was throwing a huge wake. White water streaming behind. But at night, without a moon, against dark water, they were almost invisible. 500 yards. Morton's voice cracked with tension. "Final bearing and shoot. Fire 1, fire 2, fire 3, fire 4. 4 torpedoes leaped from Wahoo's bow tubes. Running time 70 seconds. O'Kane counted in his head. Watched the target. Still no reaction. The Japanese still didn't know. 50 seconds. 40 seconds. 30 seconds. Then the first torpedo hit. 22-26 hours. The explosion lit up the night. Orange fireball amidships on the transport. The sound arrived a second later. Huge thunderclap. Water and debris shot 100 feet in the air. The transport staggered, listed immediately. Second torpedo hit. 8 seconds later, forward hold. Another massive explosion. The transport's bow lifted out of the water. O'Kane saw tiny figures jumping overboard. Men abandoning ship. Too late. The bow was already going down. Third torpedo hit. Stern. The transport broke in half. Just snapped like a toy. The two pieces diverged. The bow sinking fast. The stern rolling. 3 hits in 20 seconds. That transport was gone. 6,000 tons. Maybe 1,000 men aboard. Dead or drowning. 1 target destroyed. But now alarms were screaming. Across the entire convoy. The destroyers had heard the explosions. Searchlights snapped on. Started sweeping the water. Looking for the attacker. One spotlight caught Wahoo for just a second. O'Kane saw the destroyer turn. "Hard over. Coming straight at them. Hard left rudder," Morton shouted. "Reload tubes 1 through 4. Next target. That transport on our port bow." His voice was ice calm. They'd just destroyed 1 ship. Now they needed to destroy more before the destroyers killed them. Wahoo heeled into the turn. Her diesels roaring. 20 knots. The nearest destroyer was accelerating. 35 knots. But they were 3 miles away. Wahoo had time. Maybe. The convoy was scattering. Ships breaking formation. Turning away. Running. But they were slow. Fat merchant ships. 10 knots maximum. Wahoo was faster. O'Kane picked the next target. Another big transport. 5,000 yards. Running northeast. Exposed stern. Perfect. 2-9 hours. Morton steadied on the new course. Bearing and shoot. Fire 5. Fire 6. Fire 7. Only 3 torpedoes. The reload wasn't complete. But 3 was enough. They were only 2,000 yards away. Point-blank range. Running time 40 seconds. O'Kane held his breath. The destroyer was closing. Searchlight sweeping. Getting closer. Find us and we die. But the torpedoes would hit first. 20 seconds. 10 seconds. 30 hours. 2 hits. Almost simultaneous. The second transport exploded. Bigger explosion than the first. Something volatile in the cargo. Ammunition, maybe. The entire center of the ship vaporized. Gone. Just debris raining into the ocean. The bow and stern were sinking independently. 2 hits, 1 destroyed ship. 2 minutes and 2 ships down. The convoy was pure chaos now. Ships turning in every direction. Searchlights sweeping wildly. Destroyers racing around. Radio calls in Japanese crackling over the frequencies. O'Kane couldn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Panic. Confusion. Fear. Morton was calm. Calculating. That one, he pointed to a transport on the convoy's eastern edge. He's running for shallow water. Won't make it. Come right to course 045. Prepare tubes 1 through 4. The reload was complete. 4 more torpedoes ready. Wahoo turned hard. The diesels strained. The destroyer was still coming. Closer now. Maybe 2 miles. Its searchlight swept past Wahoo twice. Nearly caught them. But there was so much chaos, so many ships moving, the destroyer couldn't identify targets. 34 hours. Third transport lined up. 3,500 yards. Broadside shot. Couldn't miss. Fire 1, fire 2, fire 3, fire 4. Morton fired all 4. Didn't hold anything back. This was the moment. Maximum destruction before the destroyers organized. Running time 60 seconds. O'Kane watched. The transport was zigzagging. Random evasive maneuvers, but at 3,500 yards, zigzagging didn't matter. The torpedoes were too close. 50 seconds. 40. The transport turned, exposed more of its length, making itself a bigger target. 2:35 hours. 3 hits. The first torpedo hit the engine room. The transport went dark. Power out. Dead in the water. The second torpedo hit forward. Cargo holds. The third hit aft. The transport didn't explode dramatically. It just died. Started sinking immediately, settling by the stern. The crew was abandoning ship. Lifeboats dropping. Men jumping. They had maybe 3 minutes before it went under. 3 ships destroyed in 9 minutes. O'Kane felt something wild building in his chest. Not joy exactly. More like vindication. This was working. The unauthorized tactic was actually working. They were sinking more ships in 10 minutes than Doctrine achieved in 10 patrols. But the destroyers were adapting. One destroyer had figured out where Wahoo was. Its searchlight locked on, held steady. O'Kane saw the destroyer turn, pointed straight at them. Gun flashes rippled along its deck. They were shooting. Morton saw it too. All ahead flank. Hard right rudder. Get us away from that light. Wahoo turned hard. The first shells landed 200 yards short. Huge water spouts. 5-inch naval guns. A direct hit would cut Wahoo in half. Another salvo closer. 100 yards. Walk the shells in and they'd get lucky eventually. But Wahoo was turning away, using her speed. The destroyer was faster, but it had to turn too. That took time. And while it turned, it couldn't shoot accurately. O'Kane watched the geometry. They were opening the range. 2,000 yards, 2,500 yards. The destroyer's searchlight lost them. Swept back and forth. Couldn't find them in the dark. 41 hours. Morton pointed to 2 transports on the northern edge of the convoy. Running together. Close formation. 2 for 1 shot, he said. His voice had that wild edge now, too. If we put torpedoes between them, we might get both. Worth trying. It was crazy. They'd already sunk 3 ships. Already proved the tactic worked. Smart move was escape. Dive. Disappear before the destroyers organized. But Morton wasn't thinking smart. He was thinking aggressive. How many ships could they sink before they had to run? O'Kane checked the reloads. Tubes 1 and 2 ready. Tubes 3 and 4 still loading. 2 torpedoes ready, he reported. Fire both? Fire both, Morton confirmed. That big one, he's 5,000 yards. The smaller one is right behind him. 5,200 yards. Put 1 torpedo ahead of the big one's bow. He'll turn into it. Put the second torpedo where the small one is now. Shotgun spread. It was insane calculation. Moving targets. Long range. Both ships maneuvering. This was art, not science. O'Kane called the bearings. Morton adjusted course. 22:43 hours. Fire 1. Fire 2. 2 torpedoes away. Running time 90 seconds. Too long. Too many things could go wrong. O'Kane held his breath. The big transport was turning. Just like Morton predicted. turning straight into the first torpedo's path. The smaller transport was maintaining course. Maybe didn't see the danger. Maybe too slow to react. 2:45 hours. One explosion. The bigger transport. Torpedo hit just forward of amidships. The ship shuddered, slowed, didn't sink immediately, but the damage was fatal. Taking water. Done for. The second torpedo missed, passed behind the smaller transport. Into empty ocean. One hit, one miss. 4 ships sunk, 1 damaged. Still better than any submarine had achieved following doctrine. 47 hours. Time to run. Wahoo had been on the surface for 47 minutes. The destroyers were organized now, 3 of them converging on Wahoo's position. Searchlights coordinating, gun flashes lighting up the night. Morton made the call. All ahead flank, course 180. Get us out of here, but running wouldn't be easy. The destroyers were positioned between Wahoo and open ocean. To escape, they'd have to run the gauntlet, thread between 2 destroyers. Hope the darkness and speed saved them. O'Kane looked at the geometry. It was going to be close, very close. Wahoo turned south. Full speed, 20 knots. The nearest destroyer was 3,000 yards on the port beam. The second destroyer was 4,000 yards starboard. Both were running parallel courses, trying to box Wahoo in, force her to dive, then depth charge her into oblivion. Standard anti-submarine tactics, but Wahoo wasn't following standard patterns. Morton kept her on the surface, kept the speed up, running straight between the destroyers. The bold move, the move they wouldn't expect. Steady on course. Morton's voice was ice. Don't react. Don't turn. Make them turn. The port destroyer opened fire. 5-inch guns. Shells screaming overhead. One landed 50 yards short. Waterspout towering above Wahoo's deck. O'Kane felt the spray. Warm seawater. Another salvo closer, 30 yards. The destroyer was finding the range. One more salvo would hit. But they were passing now. Getting past the destroyer's beam. Moving into its aft arc. The destroyer would have to turn to keep firing. That took time. Gave Wahoo seconds of breathing room. The second destroyer was firing now. Starboard side. Shells landing in Wahoo's wake. Behind them. Also losing the angle. 51 hours. Clear of the immediate trap, but not safe. One destroyer was turning. Coming after them. Its searchlight swept and found Wahoo. Locked on. Here came the pursuit. Destroyer versus submarine on the surface. The destroyer was faster. 35 knots to Wahoo's 20. It would catch them eventually. Morton checked the distance. 5 miles to deep water, he said to O'Kane. We need to hold them off for 5 miles. Then we dive and disappear. 5 miles. 15 minutes at current speed. Could they survive 15 minutes? The pursuing destroyer was gaining. 3,500 yards. 3,000 yards. Its guns firing constantly. Getting closer. One shell hit 20 yards off the port quarter. Shrapnel screamed overhead. Another hit 10 yards off. O'Kane felt the concussion. The water hammer. Wahoo shuddered. Too close. Way too close. Fight 4 hours. 2,500 yards. The destroyer was in good firing position. Its gunners had the range. The next salvo would hit. Morton knew it. O'Kane knew it. This was it. The moment where luck ran out. Where the gamble failed. Then Morton did something insane. Hard left rudder. All ahead flank. Prepare stern tubes. He wasn't running anymore. He was attacking. Turning toward the destroyer. Bringing Wahoo's stern tubes to bear. Attacking a destroyer with a submarine. On the surface. At night. While being shelled. The destroyer's gunners didn't expect it. Their firing solution broke. Shells landed where Wahoo had been. Not where she was. The destroyer turned, started to react, but Wahoo was turning faster. Bringing tubes 9 and 10 around. 2,000 yards. Point-blank range. Fire 9. Fire 10. 2 stern torpedoes launched, running hot and straight at the destroyer. The destroyer saw them coming. Turned hard. trying to comb the tracks, present the narrowest target. The destroyer's beam was only 40 feet. If it turned in time, the torpedoes would miss. Running time, 30 seconds. O'Kane watched the geometry. The destroyer was turning. Fast. Would the torpedoes catch it? 20 seconds. 10 seconds. The destroyer was almost beam on to the torpedo tracks. Almost safe. 56 hours. One hit. The second torpedo caught the destroyer just aft of amidships. The explosion was massive. Destroyer magazines cooking off. Secondary explosions rippling through the hull. The destroyer staggered, slowed, not sinking but damaged. Out of the fight. Morton didn't wait to watch. Hard right rudder, course 180, all ahead flank. Back to running. But the other destroyers had seen what happened, seen their sister ship hit. They were more cautious now, staying back, respecting Wahoo's teeth. 304 hours. Deep water. Morton gave the order. Dive, dive, dive. Wahoo slipped beneath the surface, disappeared. The destroyers were still up there, searching, pinging, but they'd never find her. She was gone. March 21st, 1943. At 800 hours. Wahoo surfaced 200 miles south of the attack site. Safe distance. The crew was exhausted. 48 hours of hiding, dodging search patterns, running silent while destroyers pinged overhead. But they were alive, and they'd done something unprecedented. Morton and O'Kane tallied the results. 4 transports confirmed sunk. 1 transport damaged and probably sunk. 1 destroyer damaged. Approximately 25,000 tons of enemy shipping destroyed. In 47 minutes of surface action, using tactics that weren't authorized, breaking doctrine completely. O'Kane wrote it all down in the patrol report. Every detail, every decision, the exact tactics they'd used. They radioed the bare results back to Pearl Harbor. Standard patrol report. 4 ships sunk, 1 damaged, 1 destroyer damaged. Night surface attack. Details to follow upon return. The radio operator sent it encoded. Waited for the response. It came back 6 hours later. 1 word. Acknowledged. That was it. No congratulations. No questions. Just acknowledgement. O'Kane wasn't surprised. High command probably thought they were lying, inflating the numbers. Submariners did that sometimes, claimed sinkings they couldn't confirm. But Wahoo's numbers were real, more real than any submarine report in months. The Wahoo arrived at Pearl Harbor on March 29th, tied up at the submarine base. Crewmen poured onto the dock, 9 days at sea. Tensions high the whole time. They needed shore leave, needed drinks and sleep and distance from depth charges. But first came debriefing. Admiral Charles Lockwood met them personally. Lockwood commanded submarines in the Pacific. He'd been fighting Bureau of Ordnance about torpedo problems, fighting High Command about doctrine, trying to make the submarine force effective. He'd been losing those fights. Then Wahoo showed up with impossible numbers. Lockwood took Morton and O'Kane into his office, closed the door, asked them to explain exactly what they'd done, how they'd done it. Morton laid it out: surface attacks, night operations, high-speed runs into convoys, point-blank torpedo shots, every detail, every violation of doctrine. Lockwood listened, didn't interrupt. When Morton finished, the admiral leaned back in his chair. "You know this violates standing orders," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. "You know I should reprimand you, maybe relieve you of command, maybe court-martial you." Morton nodded. "Yes, sir. We know." He didn't apologize, didn't try to justify it, just stated facts. O'Kane watched the admiral's face, watched him processing. Wahoo had sunk more tonnage in one patrol than most submarines sank all year, using unauthorized tactics. The question wasn't whether the tactics worked. The question was whether to punish success. Lockwood made his decision. "I'm not going to reprimand you," he said carefully. "I'm not going to acknowledge that what you did was acceptable, but I'm also not going to discourage it." He paused. "Let that sink in. If other submarines happen to try similar tactics, and if those tactics happen to work, I suppose I wouldn't hear about it until after the patrol, when it's too late to stop them." Morton understood. O'Kane understood. Lockwood was giving unofficial approval. "Do it! Teach others! Win the war! I'll cover for you with high command. But keep it quiet. Don't make official noise." Lockwood couldn't directly order submarines to violate doctrine. That would get him fired. But he could look the other way while aggressive captains tried new things. Word spread fast. Submarine crews talked. Submarine officers talked. Within a week, every submarine captain at Pearl Harbor knew what Wahoo had done. 4 ships in one night. Surface attacks. Against doctrine. Lockwood hadn't punished them. That meant permission. Implied permission. Unofficial permission. But permission. Lieutenant Commander Samuel Dealey commanded the USS Harder. He talked to O'Kane for 3 hours. Asked about every detail. How to approach. How to target. How to escape. Dealey took notes. Started planning his own patrol. His own surface attacks. Lieutenant Commander Richard O'Kane would later get his own command. USS Tang. He'd use the same tactics. Perfect them. Become the most successful submarine skipper in the Pacific. But that came later. By April 1943, 5 submarines at Pearl Harbor were quietly preparing to try surface attacks. Lockwood knew. He didn't stop them. Didn't officially approve either. Just watched. Waited. If it worked fleet-wide, he'd change doctrine officially. If it failed, he'd blame rogue captains. Perfect bureaucratic cover. The word also spread to Brisbane, to Fremantle, American submarine bases across the Pacific. Wahoo's patrol report circulated. Passed from skipper to skipper. Read, studied, analyzed. Some captains thought it was suicide. Reckless. Too dangerous. Others thought it was brilliant. Finally, someone had figured out how to make submarines effective. The Japanese Imperial Navy knew something had changed. They just didn't know what. Convoy losses had been manageable through 1942. American submarines were cautious, predictable, easy to defend against. Then March 1943 happened. Convoys started disappearing, not over weeks, overnight. Entire transport groups destroyed in single attacks. March 19th, 7-ship convoy in the Yellow Sea. 4 transports sunk. 1 damaged, 1 destroyer damaged. Initial reports blamed multiple submarines. Coordinated Wolfpack attack. But search patterns found only 1 submarine contact. 1 American boat had destroyed half a convoy. How? Japanese destroyer captains filed reports. Described the attack. Testified that the submarine had been on the surface, running at high speed. They'd assumed it was Japanese at first. By the time they realized the mistake, it was too late. 4 ships were already sinking. The submarine disappeared before they could counterattack effectively. High Command studied the reports. This was new. American submarines had never attacked like this before. The implications were terrifying. If American submarines started using aggressive surface tactics, Japanese convoys were in serious danger. The escort doctrine was designed for submerged threats, not surface raiders. Captain Takeuchi Shozo commanded Destroyer Division 32. His ships escorted convoys between Japan and Korea. He received new orders in early April. Change search patterns. Watch for surface threats. Post extra lookouts. Increase searchlight coverage. The Americans had changed tactics. Japanese escorts had to adapt, but adaptation was hard. Destroyers only carried so many depth charges, only had so much fuel for high-speed pursuits. Convoy escort was already demanding work. Adding surface threat monitoring stretched resources. Some convoy commanders requested additional escorts. Naval Command denied most requests. There weren't enough destroyers. Japan was fighting across the entire Pacific. Every ship was needed somewhere. April 7, 1943. USS Harder under Samuel Dealey attacked a convoy near Truk. using Wahoo's tactics. Night surface attack. High-speed approach. 3 transports sunk in 33 minutes. The Japanese escorts never got close. Harder disappeared into darkness. 2 days later, Dudley attacked another convoy. 2 more transports sunk. Same tactics. Same devastating results. April 15th. USS Trigger attacked near the palace. Surface approach. 2 transports destroyed. April 22nd. USS Snook near the Carolines. 3 ships sunk, all using surface night attacks, all following the pattern Wahoo had established. The Japanese were losing ships faster than they could build them. Japanese convoy commanders started taking extreme measures. Some sailed without lights. Complete blackout. That made navigation harder but reduced visibility. Some scattered their formations. Wider spacing between ships. That made convoys harder to manage, but reduced the chance of multiple ships being hit in one attack. Some ran at maximum speed. That burned fuel and stressed engines, but reduced time in danger zones. None of it worked well. American submarines were adapting faster than Japanese defenses. Submarine skippers shared information, compared tactics, refined approaches. Every patrol learned from the previous ones. By May 1943, surface attacks were standard practice across the Pacific submarine fleet. Not officially, Lockwood still hadn't changed doctrine formally, but practically every aggressive skipper was doing it. The Japanese started losing convoy battles they should have won. June 1943, a 10-ship convoy with 6 destroyer escorts got hit by USS Tang. O'Kane's boat now. He sank 4 transports before the escorts drove him off. 6 destroyers couldn't stop 1 submarine. That should have been impossible. But Tang was using tactics the Japanese couldn't counter. Japanese naval intelligence tried to figure out the American secret. They captured 1 submarine, USS Sculpin, in November 1943. Interrogated survivors. Asked about tactics, submarine doctrine, attack patterns. The American prisoners wouldn't talk. Some knew about surface attacks, wouldn't reveal it. Cromwell went down with his boat specifically to protect tactical information. But the Japanese figured it out anyway. Too many attacks. Too many patterns. By late 1943, Japanese escort doctrine officially recognized the surface threat. New instructions went to all convoy escorts. Assume submarines will attack on the surface. Post extra lookouts. Use searchlights aggressively. Fire on any unidentified surface contact. Don't wait for confirmation. It helped. Some American submarines started taking casualties. Surface attacks were effective but dangerous. Running on the surface meant exposure to gunfire. Some submarines got hit, some got sunk, but the exchange rate favored America. For every submarine lost, Japanese convoys lost dozens of ships. The strategic impact was massive. Japan was an island nation. Everything came by ship. Fuel, food, ammunition, equipment, reinforcements. American submarines were cutting those supply lines, starving Japanese garrisons, stranding armies. By 1944, some Japanese island bases were completely isolated. No supplies, no reinforcements, no hope. All because submarines had learned to attack effectively. And it started with Wahoo, with Morton and O'Kane breaking doctrine, with 1 unauthorized night attack that proved aggressive tactics worked. The Japanese Navy couldn't believe 1 submarine could sink 7 transports in 72 hours. But it happened, and it kept happening. Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief Pacific Fleet, formally changed submarine doctrine in August 1943, 5 months after Wahoo's attack. The new directive was carefully worded. Submarine commanders are authorized to conduct surface attacks when tactical conditions favor such operations. No admission that the previous doctrine was wrong. No acknowledgement that submarine commanders had been conducting surface attacks for months without authorization. Just quiet bureaucratic approval of what was already happening. Admiral Lockwood sent his own message to all submarine skippers. More direct. Aggressive tactics have proven successful. Continue current operational methods. Translation. Keep doing what you're doing. Surface attacks work. High Command finally admits it. You're not violating orders anymore. You're following them. Morton and O'Kane never got official credit for revolutionizing submarine tactics. No medals for changing doctrine. No formal recognition. The Navy didn't publicly admit that a lieutenant and a commander had proven the entire submarine establishment wrong. Bureaucracies don't work that way. Instead, the new tactics were presented as natural evolution. Careful analysis by staff officers. Thoughtful doctrine refinement. Not desperate improvisation by combat officers who were tired of watching men die. But within the submarine community, everyone knew. Every skipper, every executive officer, every torpedo man and engine room chief. Wahoo had changed everything. Morton and O'Kane were legends, the men who'd figured it out. The men who'd bet their lives on an idea and won. Submarine crews bought them drinks at every port, asked for their advice, wanted to learn from them. The results spoke for themselves. In 1942, American submarines sank 180 Japanese ships. Total tonnage approximately 725,000 tons. That was 18 months of war. 18 months of submarines following doctrine. Conducting careful submerged attacks, being safe and cautious, and mostly ineffective. In 1943, after surface tactics became widespread, American submarines sank 335 ships, 1.5 million tons, in 1 year, double the previous 18 months. And that was with torpedo problems still not fully fixed. Imagine what those numbers would have been with working torpedoes. Type 44 was even better. 600 ships sunk. 2.7 million tons of Japanese shipping sent to the bottom. Japan's merchant fleet was being annihilated. Their economy strangling. Their armies starving. All because submarines had learned to be aggressive. To attack on the surface. To close with the enemy and sink them at point-blank range. The Bureau of Ordnance finally fixed the Mark 14 torpedo in late 1943. Fixed the depth-keeping mechanism. Fixed the contact exploder. Fixed the magnetic exploder. All the problems submarine commanders had been reporting for 2 years. Problems Buord had denied existed. The fixed torpedoes combined with aggressive tactics made American submarines absolutely devastating. Some boats averaged 2 ships sunk per patrol. Some exceeded that. USS Tang, under Richard O'Kane, became the highest-scoring submarine in Pacific Fleet. 33 ships sunk, 116,454 tons, all using the tactics O'Kane had helped develop on Wahoo: surface attacks, night operations, aggressive prosecution. O'Kane received the Medal of Honor for his command of Tang, for his extraordinary success. Nobody mentioned that his tactics violated doctrine. Doctrine had changed. USS Wahoo continued its aggressive patrols. Morton pushed deeper into Japanese waters, took more risks, sank more ships, became one of the most successful submarines in the fleet. Through 1943, Wahoo completed 7 patrols, sank 27 ships, 119 to 100 tons. Morton received the Navy Cross 3 times. His crew worshipped him. Other submarine commanders studied his patrol reports like scripture. October 11, 1943. USS Wahoo was transiting La Pérouse Strait between Japan and Sakhalin Island, returning from her 7th patrol, heading home to Pearl Harbor. She'd been at sea for 53 days, sunk 4 more ships. Low on fuel, low on torpedoes, time to go home. Morton radioed their position. Said they'd arrive Pearl Harbor around October 25th. That was the last communication anyone received from Wahoo. Japanese records showed what happened. A patrol aircraft spotted Wahoo transiting on the surface, called in naval assets. 3 submarine chasers converged. Wahoo dove. The chasers dropped depth charges, 77 of them. Pattern bombing. Saturated the water. One of the charges cracked Wahoo's pressure hull. She went down. All hands lost. 80 men, including Commander Dudley Morton, age 36, including Lieutenant Richard O'Kane, who had transferred off Wahoo 1 patrol earlier and survived to command Tang. Wait. O'Kane wasn't on that patrol. He'd transferred to new construction. To take command of Tang, he survived. Morton died. The aggressive captain who'd changed submarine warfare died conducting aggressive operations deep in enemy waters. The irony was brutal. Morton had saved hundreds of American submariners by proving surface tactics worked, then died on a submerged transit, killed by the kind of patrol aircraft that couldn't touch submarines before they started attacking aggressively. The Navy didn't announce Wahoo's loss immediately. Submarines were listed as overdue, then missing, then presumed lost. Months could pass before families learned the truth. Morton's wife didn't receive official notification until January 1944, 3 months after her husband died. That was standard procedure, but it didn't make it easier. O'Kane survived the war. Barely. Tang was sunk by its own torpedo in October 1944. A circular run. The torpedo malfunctioned, turned back, hit Tang. She sank in the Taiwan Strait. Only 9 men survived. O'Kane was one of them. Spent the rest of the war as a POW, came home in 1945, received the Medal of Honor from President Truman, stayed in the Navy until 1957, retired as a Rear Admiral, died in 1994, age 83. He gave interviews late in his life, talked about Wahoo, about Morton, about that night in March 1943 when they'd decided to break doctrine. "Morton was the bravest man I ever knew," O'Kane said in a 1980 interview. He understood that following safe doctrine was killing submariners. He was willing to risk court-martial to save lives. He was willing to risk his life to prove there was a better way. And he was right. O'Kane's voice broke when he talked about Morton, 50 years later, and the loss still hurt. Historians estimate that surface attack tactics saved between 80 and 120 American submariner lives. That's compared to projected casualties if submarines had continued following pre-1943 doctrine. More aggressive tactics were more dangerous, but they were also more effective. Submarines spent less time in enemy waters, less time being hunted. They struck fast and escaped. The net result was fewer American losses despite higher risk operations. The strategic impact on Japan was catastrophic. American submarines sank 1,300 Japanese merchant ships during the war. 5.3 million tons. That was 55% of all Japanese merchant tonnage. Japan couldn't replace those losses, couldn't supply their armies, couldn't feed their population. The submarine campaign strangled Japan economically, made their eventual defeat inevitable. Not the only factor, but a major one. And it changed because one commander and one executive officer decided doctrine was wrong, because they valued results over regulations, because they were willing to risk everything to prove there was a better way. Morton died for it. O'Kane survived to see it validated. Between them, they changed naval warfare forever. March 19, 2003. 60 years after Wahoo's famous attack. Richard O'Kane was 92 years old, living in California. Retired Rear Admiral, Medal of Honor recipient, one of the most decorated submariners in American history. A researcher visited him, asked about that night in 1943. The night everything changed. O'Kane remembered every detail. The calm sea, the darkness, standing on Wahoo's conning tower, Morton beside him. The smell of diesel exhaust, the sound of the convoy ahead. The decision that could have ended both their careers. "We didn't think we were being revolutionary," O'Kane said. His voice was quiet, thoughtful. "We just thought doctrine was stupid. We knew there had to be a better way." Morton had the courage to try it. The researcher asked if O'Kane ever regretted it. Regretted pushing for aggressive tactics. Tactics that ultimately got Morton killed. O'Kane was silent for a long moment. "Every single day," he finally answered. "I think about Morton every single day. About Wahoo. About all those men who died. But I also think about the men who lived. The submariners who survived because we proved surface attacks worked. The Japanese sailors we killed instead of letting their convoys through. War is about arithmetic. Cold arithmetic. We saved more lives than we cost. But that doesn't make missing Morton any easier." In 2006, researchers found Wahoo's wreckage, 213 feet deep in La Perouse Strait, right where Japanese records said she went down. The hull was intact. The boat had died fast. The crew probably never knew what hit them. Small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. O'Kane died in 1994. He never knew they'd found his old boat. Never knew Morton's grave had been located. The U.S. Navy officially credited Wahoo with 27 ships sunk during the war. Post-war analysis of Japanese records reduced that to 19 confirmed. Still an incredible record. Still one of the most successful submarines in the Pacific. And the true impact couldn't be measured in ships sunk. It was measured in tactics changed, in doctrine revolutionized, in lives saved through aggressive innovation. That's how real innovation happens in war. Not through careful staff studies, not through peacetime exercises, not through official channels and proper procedures. It happens through combat officers who see problems and find solutions, through men who refuse to accept that "we've always done it this way" is good enough, through warriors who are willing to risk everything to prove there's a better way. Morton and O'Kane saw American submariners dying under flawed doctrine, saw Japanese convoys escaping, saw a war being lost through excessive caution. They chose to act, chose to violate orders, chose to bet their lives on an untested idea. They were right. The idea worked. It changed submarine warfare forever. It helped win the Pacific War. And it cost Morton his life. Every innovation has a price. Every revolution has casualties. The question is whether the price is worth paying. In this case, it was. Hundreds of American submariners lived because Morton and O'Kane proved surface attacks worked. Thousands of Japanese sailors died. Japan's war effort was strangled. The war ended sooner. More lives saved in the long run. But those calculations don't honor the individuals. Morton died. His crew died. They deserve to be remembered. Not just as statistics. Not just as casualties. As men who risked everything for an idea. Men who changed history. Men who proved that courage and innovation matter more than doctrine and caution. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with more untold World War II stories. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what story you'd like to hear next. These men deserve to be remembered. Their courage deserves recognition. Their innovation changed warfare. Thank you for keeping their memory alive. Thank you for caring about history. Thank you for ensuring that their sacrifice means something even 80 years later. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered.